In our last session, we found out the real reason why the three visitors were there. They were on their way to Sodom. And Abraham guessed why they were going on to Sodom. It was to pass judgment on that city, to check on that city. And today, we will continue on that. We're now in verse 22 of chapter 18 of Genesis, verse 22 to 26. Let's read. And the men turned their faces from there and headed toward Sodom. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, "Will you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Peradventure, there be 50 righteous within the city. Will you also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked. You wouldn't do that, would you? And that the righteous should be as the wicked, that be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do the right thing?" And the Lord said, "If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within that city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes." So, in tomorrow's session, or in the next session, we'll find out what Abraham did further. But let's unpack the thought for today. Back in verse 21, the Lord said, "I will go down now to see how wicked Sodom had become." It did not take a genius to realize God was going to judge that city. The men started their journey towards Sodom, but Abraham blocked the Lord's path. You know, the way I see it, Abraham was either very bold or very stupid. Blocked the path of the Lord? But he knew Sodom was due to be destroyed. He decided to stand in the gap. Folks, have you ever heard of standing in the gap? When we pray for righteous people and we pray for the righteous, other righteous people who are having a hard time, we stand in the gap for them. In other words, we intercede for them. And that is what Abraham was doing. So he asked, "Will you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Perhaps there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you also destroy and not spare the place for those 50 righteous that are in it?" So starts one of the most remarkable intercessory prayers in the Bible. Abraham continued, "Far be it from you to act like this, to kill the righteous with the wicked. And far be it from you that the righteous should be as the wicked, or counted as the wicked. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right?" It's truly amazing that Abraham recognized that God was and still is the judge of all the earth. and not only of the chosen descendants and circle of influence of Abraham. Abraham was humble enough to realize, even though he worshiped the true God, God was still the God of the whole earth and not just of him and his clan. Abraham appeared both to God's righteous character. He appealed both to God's righteous character and his loving kindness in preventing the destruction of an entire city for the sake of a godly remnant. I would say 50 righteous souls out of about a few 100,000 was more than reasonable. Wow. As Jesus compared believers to be salt of the earth, it can be seen how extremely important it is for there to be the presence of even a tiny godly minority to make a difference in an ungodly community. That is what Abraham was appealing to God for. A pastor of one of the churches I attended, Dr. Paul B. Smith, in Toronto, of the Great People's Church, wrote a book called From the Salt Shaker onto the Earth. You see, as beautiful as a salt shaker may be, just like the church is beautiful, beautiful domed stadium. Wow, look at that. If you've ever been to the People's Church in Toronto, you know it is very spacious. There is no poles blocking the view. You can sit anywhere, and wow, it houses 2,000 people easily. But you know what? You can sit in that church in building, and you can sit in that church building and listen and say, wow, isn't it beautiful? But unless you characterize salt and go out into the world, you can't make a difference in the society in which you live. You know, Abraham was counting on the righteous, the few righteous, making a difference in the community. But do you think that was actually going on? Well, we'll find out in a few sessions from now. So the Lord answered, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within that city, then I'm going to spare all the place for their sakes. But Abraham didn't stop there. No, he had a specific number in mind, as we shall see in our next few verses. Until then, so long. See you next session.